Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Unfriended, the new found Skype footage horror movie. So I have to admit, going into this, I was being kind of an unprofessional prick. When I first saw the trailer for Unfriended, I was convinced that I had just witnessed the preview for what would obviously be the worst movie of 2015. And 2015 had already sucked pretty hard by the time I saw the trailers for Unfriended. Everything about it just seemed terrible. I thought the Skype gimmick, I understand why a filmmaker would want to experiment with that, because even though it's not really original, I have seen variations of the same idea before. Like, I believe VHS had a segment dedicated to online chat horror, even though the movie's called VHS. It is different. You don't see it happen too often, so, it would be, at least in theory, a refreshing spin on the found footage formula. However, I mean, it's Skype. You can't really do a whole lot with webcams for horror movies. I mean, look at this set. Can you imagine a horror film taking place back here? I don't see really any space for, spooky imagery to occur. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but that's not really fair. That's just your room. Ideally, the locations they're working with would be a lot more interesting and provide more opportunities for scary moments. Well, that is true, except their lighting is a lot worse than mine, and you could tell this just from the previews. So it's all like dark, so you can barely see what's going on in the background. You could only really see them huddled in front of the computer. So just their faces, really. So there's not going to be any creepy imagery. You can't do really any stock sequences. And even if there was space for all of that, you're seeing so many screens at once that you can't really pay attention to one long enough to really get any horror out of them. So that, I mean, this is just all thoughts I'm having while I'm watching the previews. That has nothing to do with the actual movie yet, although I'll tie in how I ultimately felt into these concerns I initially had. But above everything, it just seemed like something that the idea might work in small doses, like a short film, but as a full-length feature, I'd get burnt out on it in the first 20 minutes. But even if you stripped the gimmick away and just looked at it as a traditional found footage horror film, I couldn't take anything seriously. Like, there's the whole joke of how come they don't just turn off their computers or turn off Skype. There's a real funny parody on YouTube you should search for. Well, they actually do explain that in the movie. However, I didn't know that while I'm watching the trailers, so it's kind of fucking hilarious. And then, the death scenes are just so over the top that, instead of screaming at the blender bit, I was laughing, and I don't think that was the intent. So it just all looked incredibly stupid. And I think what made my negativity expand, what aggravated my hatred towards Unfriended, even though I had not really seen it, so I probably had no reason to feel hatred, is the critics actually seemed to like it. I don't know what about that pissed me off so much. Maybe it's because now I know I'll have to see it, or maybe it's because I was wondering how this movie conned audiences into thinking that it was scary. Usually, I'd actually disagree with that train of thought. Cinema is an illusion, so a successful horror film is supposed to con its audience into thinking it's scary because it's all fake. So why I was, thinking about that, it just ties into the fact that I was being kind of petty and unprofessional and douchey towards this movie. But I had to see it, so I went into the theater, I sat down and began watching with a snarl on my face. And was the film as bad as I thought it would be? Was it any good in the end? Who was right, my initial expectations or the critics? Neither. The film wasn't that bad, but at the same time, it's not really good either. I was actually almost a little disappointed when I walked out of the movie because I was expecting a lot of things. I was expecting to either be pulling my hair out in rage or being pleasantly surprised. But instead, I was like, it's kind of mediocre. When I was writing the review, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be generous and give this film a 2-star rating or be a little harsh and give it 1.5-star rating. I was originally just going to go with a 2-star. However, I felt like most of my points were more negative, so it almost seemed like a 1.5-star would be more fitting, but I ended up being a little more generous simply because I was not bored and it is a little different. I do think that this film will stay with me for quite some time, long after I've forgotten better horror movies. If I gotta praise this film for anything, it's not really generic. You could tell that the writer is really trying to give us something unique, to break down the stereotypes, go beyond our expectations. However, I just didn't really work, and I think part of that is the trailer spoils so much that most of the twists lose their impact within the context of the film, but also, like, the foreshadowing was too obvious. So I might actually spoil a few things simply because it was just too predictable, even though it was trying not to be. I'll try to warn you before that happens, but just a heads up. But I always admire ambition. I hate films like Annabelle, where it's just like it was generated by a machine that compiles all the cliches together and it feels more like a product than a movie. For all of its failures, I'd say Unfriended is a movie. I do admire the effort. So, God, where do I begin? Well, Unfriended is a pretty well-paced movie, and I think that's sort of one of the reasons why I ultimately was tolerable of it, or I could tolerate it. It starts off pretty slow and aggravating. In fact, I was beginning to turn on the whole Skype thing because I was tired of following these characters. I was tired of seeing the same locations over and over again, the same kinds of visuals, and I was just getting a headache. But once the shit starts really going down, it did grab my interest. It begins where they think they're being screwed with, by a troll. And it's kind of interesting seeing how they respond to that, the countermeasures they take. Well, then they begin to wonder if maybe they're dealing with a serious hacker. And once again, it's interesting seeing how they respond to that, how they try to, mount their own counterattack in dealing with this threat. And then it becomes apparent that they're dealing with something a lot worse. Their responses are not quite as interesting as they were before, but it never lost my interest. The film does take some turns that are pretty aggravating, and it wouldn't have ended the way it did if the characters were reasonable people. But, yeah, it never slowed down for too long. It never went too fast. It was nicely paced. That's all I really need to say. From once it starts going to when it ends, I never was impatient or exhausted. I was hooked to the screen even when I was witnessing some really stupid and awful shit occurring. And I mean awful in the bad movie kind of way, not the awful and just the content, even though there are some fucked up moments in this film too. So where did this movie fail? Well, it's not scary for pretty much the reasons I said earlier when I'm discussing the trailer. You just can't really do a whole lot with this background, and the lighting is so dark that you can't really make up anything, once again, any creepy imagery in the background, which I think would have made this so much better, especially if it was all very random. Maybe you could spot something if you look closely, like on Blu-ray, but I didn't notice anything, and I with the lighting, I just don't think I would. But that would make at least for an interesting repeat viewing if I felt like there was something going on back here. Instead, it's just the actors growing paranoia until they reach a death scene. Well, the death scenes are really, really, really stupid. The ghost is pretty much forcing them to kill themselves in crazy ass ways, and once again, you see half of those in the frickin' trailer. But I just don't know what I was supposed to feel in regards to them. Some of the scenes are just too over the top to really take seriously, but they're not gory enough to really work, as something more extreme. Take the blender sequence, for example. You don't see a whole lot more than what you see in the trailer. And yeah, it's pretty grisly, but it's just too extreme, but it's not showing enough gore. I mean, case in point, Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland. I remember there's that scene where the girl rips her jaw open, and that is a very, very over-the-top moment, especially compared or contrasted with the rest of the film. However, it's just so intense that, yeah, you feel it. But here, you're witnessing this at a kind of a distance. It's all sort of blurry, so you can't totally make out everything that's going on, but you can make out enough to where you're just kind of snickering at it. But then afterwards, after these death scenes happen, they always screw with the tone. So, like, there will be some ironic music playing in the background, which is obviously the ghost screwing with these characters. But, once again, I can never feel any sense of tragedy in regards to these deaths, because the mood whiplash would suddenly make the humorous. But it's never really funny for it either. So, and part of the reason is I'm not really sure if I was supposed to feel bad for these characters or not, because it becomes pretty obvious that these are not good people. They bullied this girl into committing suicide, or to where she eventually committed suicide, and they're only interested in saving their own skin, so they will often sell out somebody else. So I don't really like any of them, but at the same time, I don't feel cathartic whenever the ghost kills them, because they pretty much make a big point that the chick who committed suicide was kind of a bitch too, who probably would have done the exact same thing. Is the director trying to make a point? Is this like about the cycle of bullying, and that the ghost is a metaphor for repressed guilt? I could potentially take that idea seriously if I felt that these people were capable of feeling guilt. I think the idea is maybe they aren't bad people, but they're kind of weak-willed, and they sort of got caught up in the moment, and they're just too weak to take responsibility for their actions. I could see that coming from a real person, but these characters just all feel like movie caricatures. The main girl, and this is where I'm going to have to spoil some, but you see this in the trailer, so it's not really that much of a surprise, but she's presented as the innocent, normal girl, and it becomes apparent that she's not innocent. She cheated on her boyfriend with his best friend. Once again, you see that in the trailer. I am not spoiling anything. And it only seems to get worse for her, but what bugged me, and the reason why I could not take this seriously, is she knows how to stop this. She looks at this website that explains all she has to do to stop this, and it seems like she's taking it seriously while she's reading it, and yet it's like she never really thinks about, oh wait, I could just do what this website says that I looked at earlier and that I occasionally see when I'm flipping through stuff. No, she keeps trying to hide, secrets from this ghost who obviously knows everything. So, idiot. Only dumb movie characters will do that, because that's how you drive the story. Once again, if these people acted reasonable and normal, they probably would have all gotten out of this. But nah, they're not. They're movie characters. They're victim fodder, glorified victim fodder. Also, I don't know if this was intentional, but it's revealed that they're the ones who put up the video, and apparently after she committed suicide, they never took it down, or at least changed the title, which is "Go Kill Yourself" or something like that. So yeah, these people are obviously assholes. I don't think YouTube would even allow that shit to be on there for that long. I mean, it's possible somebody just re-uploaded it, but there was a shit ton of hits. So I have no idea. I didn't look at the date. I probably should have, but so yeah, you're watching an unlikable ghost kill off unlikable people. What am I supposed to feel? I can't feel scared for anybody, and I can't enjoy watching them die, especially as the deaths are relatively quick for the most part, outside of the one or two, well, that one blender sequence. So that it just kind of constantly stumbled over itself in regards to the character writing, the message it wanted to present towards the audience, and its attempt to be a horror movie. It wasn't scary. The thematic material doesn't work because none of these people resemble normal people, and the characters are just so unlikable that they'll do stupid things in order to get you pissed at them. What's next? The acting is good though. This is one of those movies where they used long takes, and I thought they did a solid job at handling that. So I am willing to praise what this film does well, but otherwise it was just dumb. It was silly. I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Oh yeah, what was with that chat roulette bit? At one point, the main character decides she's going to contact the police by using chat roulette. I was wondering if that was product placement. However, they don't present chat roulette in a flattering light, so that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. In fact, really nothing, I presume, was product placement is presented in the most flattering light. Facebook is a haven for bullies. You could apparently upload people getting or killing themselves onto YouTube, and ghosts haunt Skype. So I'd be kind of pissed if I was one of these companies and I had paid Unfriended in order to use my product, but I don't know if that's what happened or not. But the chat roulette thing was just stupid. You'd have an easier time contacting the police if you just screamed off the top of your head for help. But no, apparently, when you know that the ghost can apparently intercept calls to the police using your phone, you're going to have a better chance using chat fucking roulette. So yeah, Unfriended was pretty stupid, but I honestly wasn't angry at it by the time I left the theaters. It wasn't. I prefer over stuff like The Woman in Black 2, which is just kind of boring and generic. Unfriended, for all of its badness, it was short and it wasn't that slow. So would I recommend it? Not really. If you have like Hulu or Netflix and it comes up on there, okay, but I would not go to the theaters and pay money to see this movie. I wouldn't even really rent a DVD on its own, like a video store, if those still exist. So that's all I have to say. Please read my written review. Once again, I apologize for the length. I've also done written reviews of all the Puppet Master movies, as well as It Follows, an actually good horror movie that's in the theaters, so be sure to watch It Follows, or at least read my opinions on it to see if that's your kind of movie. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.